Hello, this is Mary Keller Ditta, and I'm looking at how to know God's will. One of the ways we can know God's will is how He interacts with the people in the Bible, the ones that He has had recorded, so that we can know His words and His actions, and then His relationship with individuals and also with the country or the people of Israel. So we're looking at the chapter of, or the book of Ruth. We already looked at chapter 1, and now we're going to look at chapter 2. And so I'm going to read it first. Well, actually, I think I'll do a little bit of a review. So, Naomi and her husband had moved from Judah. Let me see once. They were from Bethlehem of Judah, and there was a famine, and they had moved to Moab, and they had 2 sons. And it seems like shortly after they got there, the husband died. And so now Naomi had her 2 sons to take care of her, and she to take care of them. We only know that they were old enough that they were married. And after 10 years of living in Moab, they both died. And it seems like they died shortly, one after the other, because it just says here, it says, when they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion died also. And the woman, Naomi, was left with neither her 2 boys nor her husband. And she says, the Lord has dealt bitterly with me. Later on, she says, she tells her daughters-in-law, to go back to their families, to their homes, so that they can have husbands and have a happy life. Both of the daughters weep. They don't want to leave her, but one decides, okay, I will go back to my family, and the other one, Ruth, says she will go with Naomi to an unknown land for her. And when they get there, the townspeople say, let's see here, it says, the whole town was excited about the return. Can this be Naomi? But she said, do not call me Naomi, which means sweet, but call me Mara, which means bitter. For the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why should you call me sweet, since the Lord has brought me to trial, and the Almighty has pronounced an evil sentence on me? So, that was Naomi's feelings. She felt like she had a lot of tragedy. She lost her husband, and then 10 years later lost her 2 sons. Her daughters-in-law were not Benjamites. They were not from the tribe of Judah. And so she admonished them to go back to their families. And when the people of Bethlehem saw her and rejoiced, she said, don't rejoice over me, because the Lord has dealt harshly with me. He's pronounced an evil sentence on me. Call me bitter, don't call me sweet. So I want I want to look at this just a little bit more because I think the book of Ruth is just as much about the book of Naomi. Someone who has been dealt tragedy from the Lord in her eyes. She's feeling bitter. But I want to ask you the question, is she bitter? Is she bitter against God? And once again, I would encourage you to pause me and think and pray and look at scriptures and answer questions. Think about things. Was she bitter? And if you read chapter 1, you might know that she's not bitter towards God. She feels abandoned by God. She feels hurt and alone. And why do we know she is not truly bitter? It has to do with her daughters-in-law. What's their response to Naomi when she tells them that they should go back to their families? Do they want to go back? They both weep and cleave to her. They don't want to leave Naomi. This tells you that Naomi's words were not bitter towards God. When Ruth says to her, I will go, your people will be my people, your God will be my God. Where you die, I will be buried. It says they loved Naomi. Ruth would not want to go back to go with Naomi if she were a bitter person. She would not want to accept the God of Naomi if all she heard from Naomi's mouth was how wronged she felt by this God that she worships. No, the evidence, the fruit of the lips, the fruit of the actions is that they loved her, both of them, and Ruth was willing to go with her, to make her her own family, to leave what she had, to go with Naomi. So this tells you that Naomi might have felt bitter in her heart and cried bitter tears, but she still trusted the Lord. And she still had a good relationship with her daughters-in-law. So keep this in mind when we read the rest of the chapters about Naomi and Ruth. So now we're going to read chapter 2. Naomi had a powerful relative named Boaz through the clan of her husband Elimelech. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, I would like to go and glean grain in the field of anyone who will allow me. Naomi said to her, Go ahead, my daughter. So she went. The field she entered to glean after the harvesters happened to be the section belonging to Boaz of the clan of Elimelech. Soon along came Boaz from Bethlehem and said to the harvesters, The Lord be with you. And they replied, The Lord bless you. Boaz asked the young man overseeing his harvesters, Whose young woman is this? The young man overseeing the harvesters answered, She is the young Moabite who came back with Naomi from the plateau of Moab. She said, I would like to gather the gleanings into sheaves after the harvesters. Ever since she came this morning, she has remained here until now, with scarcely a moment's rest. Boaz then spoke to Ruth. Listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in anyone else's field. You are not to leave here. Stay here with my young women. Watch to see which field is to be harvested and follow them. Have I not commanded the young men to do you no harm? When you are thirsty, go and drink from the vessels the young people have filled. Casting herself prostrate upon the ground, she said to him, Why should I, a foreigner, be favored with your attention? Boaz answered her, I have had a complete account of what you have done for your mother-in-law after your husband's death. You have left your father and mother in the land of your birth and have come to people whom previously you did not know. May the Lord reward you for what you have done. May you receive a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. She said, May I prove worthy of your favor, my Lord. You have comforted me. You have spoken to the heart of your servant, and I am not even one of your servants. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, Come here and have something to eat. Dip your bread in the sauce. Then, as she sat near the harvesters, he handed her some roasted grain, and she ate her fill and had some left over. As she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young people, Let her glean among the sheaves themselves without scolding her, and even drop some handfuls and leave them for her to glean. Do not rebuke her. She gleaned in the field until evening, and when she beat out what she had gleaned, it came to about an ephah of barley, which she took into the town and showed to her mother-in-law. Next, she brought out what she had left over from the meal and gave it to her. So her mother-in-law said to her, Where did you glean today? Where did you go to work? May the one who took notice of you be blessed. Then she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked. The man at whose place I work today is named Boaz, she said. May he be blessed by the Lord, who never fails to show kindness to the living and to the dead. Naomi exclaimed to her daughter-in-law. She continued, This man is a near relative of ours, one of our redeemers. He even told me, added Ruth the Moabite, Stay with my young people until they complete my entire harvest. You would do well, my daughter, Naomi rejoined, to work with his young women. In someone else's field you might be insulted. So she stayed gleaning with Boaz's young women until the end of the barley and the wheat harvests. So, so let's look at Ruth. Ruth says she's going to go work. She's going to go work in some fields and glean. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole process of gleaning and when you can glean and where you can glean, but you can glean after the harvesters. She goes to the field of Boaz. She doesn't know that that's Boaz and that Boaz is a relative and a powerful relative. And as Naomi says, she said that he is one of our redeemers, which means that He is one that can settle their debts or to take care of them. Let me see once. It says here, for the first time, the story uses the Hebrew word go el Redeemer for the responsibilities of the circle of kinship surrounding Naomi and Ruth and their deceased relatives. Involved are the recovery or retention of family land, the release of a relative from voluntary servitude to pay debts, and redeeming blood or vengeance, attested in passages which regulate such vengeance. No explicit connection is made elsewhere in the Bible between the marriage responsibilities and redeeming. Anyways, point being is that the Lord directs our steps when we entrust ourselves to Him and want His will in our life. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth and in our lives and in my life and in the lives I pray for, as your will is done in heaven. It is His promise to direct our steps. He directs Ruth to the land of Boaz. Sometimes the Lord directs our steps and it's not a happy ending. I believe the Lord directed Naomi and her husband's steps to Moab, and yet there her husband dies, and in 10 years her sons die. Not everything that happens is joyful. It can be sorrowful. It can make us feel bitter and abandoned, but we're not. It's His promise. You have to see the whole picture. Just like Jesus, He knew from the beginning what His end would be. And for the joy set before Him, He endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of God and the Father in heaven. We have to see the whole picture and have faith that what happens when we trust God to direct our steps, that He does so. So, Ruth, she's being favored by Boaz. And why did Boaz favor her? Because he had heard about her. It said that he heard the full account of how she left her mother and father and her home and what she knew to come and to be and to take care of Naomi. It says, and he says, and have come to a people whom previously you did not know. May the Lord reward you for what you have done. And then he says, may you receive a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. Not only was she coming to a strange land and a strange people, but she was coming to a strange God. But you know, Naomi, and it must be her sons as well, has set a good example of faith and love for God. They didn't forsake God in the land that they had lived in. And so they were a testimony and a witness to the God of Israel, that He is our refuge. So remember that. Remember Naomi through this, and then the actions of Ruth, and why Ruth was willing to do this. And so she has received a verbal blessing from Boaz, but then a physical blessing, because she's allowed to glean freely. And he invites her to table with them. So we see that Boaz was a very righteous man because he is generous to his servants. I'm not sure, the harvesters. He tells the men to leave her alone. I'm sure he told them to leave all the women alone. But young men are young men, and sometimes when they get together, they can be a little not so kind to women. But he's the overseer, and he's the owner, and then he has an overseer, and he directs him to be generous to Ruth. So then when Ruth goes and has a meal, then she has her fill. She doesn't go hungry, and she takes what's left of her meal, her leftovers. She takes them home to Naomi, plus the grain that she has gleaned. And then Naomi is like, oh, where did you go? Whose field was it? And when she hears it's Boaz, she did not tell Ruth, to go to Boaz's field. She didn't. Otherwise, it says here, in the very beginning, I would like to go and glean in the field of anyone who will allow me. And she tells her to go. Okay, go. She doesn't say go to Boaz's. And when she finds out it's Boaz and how he treated her, she's like, oh my goodness, he is our kinsman redeemer. So she is hopeful that as a kinsman redeemer, he will do right by her. And she admonishes Naomi, don't go anyplace else now, because he's giving you this privilege. She says here, stay with my young people. Oh. You would do well, my daughter, to work with the young women. In someone else's field, you might be insulted. So, she's not thinking anything else beyond the fact that Ruth has been given favor by Boaz. And we also know that Ruth worked hard from the very moment she got there. She ate at the meal, but then she worked hard. She gleaned in the field until evening. I'm going to tell you, that's God's will, that we work hard at whatever we have to do, that whatever God has allowed us to put our hand to provide for ourselves and our families. Ruth was providing for Naomi, and she worked hard. And she's going to rise up early, and she worked until it was dusk. We should do the same. That's God's will. Remember, Boaz had heard a good report about her, and he saw what she was doing. So we have a righteous man, a righteous Naomi, and a righteous Ruth. The Lord wants us to be righteous, to be doing what is right, without complaint and without bitterness of soul, without spewing bitterness. No, Naomi did not. And we know by the love that is shown to her by her daughters-in-law. So, pray about these things. Think about your station in life, where God has placed you, who He has placed in your life. All of these are in God's hands. Trust Him and be diligent every day diligent with your actions, diligent with your mouth, diligent with your heart and your mind. That's my prayer for myself and my family. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you like.